Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Reagan Gruber Moffett, and I'm the Vice President of Community Investments at the St. David's Foundation. And on behalf of the foundation, I just want to express my gratitude. It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I know you've had a long day. Many of you have serving our community. And thank you for being interested in this investing in impact opportunity and for making the time to be with us to learn more. If you're here, you likely know that the foundation introduced a new strategic plan earlier this year. A cheat sheet of that strategic plan is up on your screen right now. Pathways to Health Equity is a strategic plan that's really built on the foundation's long history of working in Central Texas. It's also built on conversations with many of you and many other partners and community. Over the course of a year, we had grantee convenings and community conversations and focus groups and one-on-ones, and we use quantitative data, things like our community health needs assessment, things like the ALICE data on who is able to live and thrive within our communities. And with the help of our board, had deep discussions about where could we as a foundation have the most impact in community. And that's what led to the three goals you see here. In shorthand, we talk about them as access to care, economic stability, and community-driven change. And as you can see, we really see them as interconnected and all necessary to achieve health equity. And you may see this other ring that's about organizational excellence. That's because as important as our external goals are, we also think it's really important for the foundation to begin working in some new ways if we're really going to have this impact that we intend to have. Those are things like using more of the tools in our toolbox. Those are things like moving more upstream in our work. And importantly, that's about focusing more of our resources, both our investments and our action, in the communities with the greatest need, even when those are the communities we know the least about. And I'd focus in on that, even when those are the communities that we know least about. Because today, as we're talking about investing in impact, part of what we're inviting in is partnership with organizations in our community that do know about some of the communities with the greatest health needs. So this open call that we're discussing today sits at the intersection of our strategic goals as an organization and these new ways that we want to work. So quite candidly, most of our grant making through our history has been by invitation only, and we've invited wonderful organizations, but it's often limited our ability to know everyone in community who is doing this work. So today, as part of this call, we're beginning to invite in both partners we know and partners we don't know, to start to answer some of the questions that we have about how to have this impact. So I will turn it over to Andrew Levac and Abena Asante, who will be your guides, your facilitators for today's conversation. And I want to introduce them by saying they don't have all the answers, but they have a few of them. So look forward to today's conversation and hope you will ask lots and lots of questions.
Thank you, Reagan. And hello, everyone. Abena Asante here, one of the senior program officers at the foundation. I am super excited that we are having this conversation and that we even have this open call available. Most of you were involved in informing our strategic plan that led to the development of our goal areas that Reagan mentioned. So I'm going to start with going over the funding overview on investing in impact, community-directed giving through intermediaries, and then I will turn it over to Andrew. So what do we mean by intermediaries? We at St. David's Foundation, recognizing that there could be different interpretations of intermediaries, intermediaries to us mean that we are looking at established local entities that are locally rooted that engage in a wide variety of activities, such as rate granting, providing some capacity support, hosting pool funds. Sometimes intermediaries also help with back office support, program design and management, fiscal sponsorship, and finding the time and place to bring groups together. There are many things that can fit under intermediary. Intermediaries also could help build the capacity of organizations and individuals. At the foundation, we see intermediaries as fulfilling a critical role. We recognize that we don't have the relationships with the communities with the greatest need. And some of the nonprofit organizations, intermediary organizations, relationships. And so this is an opportunity to work with organizations that are more proximate to the communities with the greatest need. So what are we looking to do with this funding opportunity? We are looking to invest in your capacity, meaning the organization's capacity. And remember, I talked about local and community rooted intermediaries. And so organizations that have built the trust, have the relationships with community is what we are interested in, not a fly-by organization. And we are also looking at these intermediaries that have the potential to re-grant St. David's Foundation's resources to low resource entities, emerging nonprofits, grassroots organizations with limited infrastructure, even neighborhood associations, informal community networks, and it could be within a certain part of county. It could be a parents group. We are also looking at community-based initiatives, community constituents, all with a goal of advancing health equity, as we have in our strategic plan that we've laid out. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. So basically, the goal is to invest in your capacity, the capacity of community-rooted organizations. The key word is the potential to re-grant St. David's Foundation's funding to serve, as I mentioned earlier, low-resource entities, emerging nonprofits, grassroots organizations with limited infrastructure, and you all can read the rest. The key here is the mission of advancing health equity and responding to what we have laid out in our strategic plan. So what are we looking for with eligibility? With all our 4 open calls, we had different eligibility guidelines. So as a regional funder, the foundation works in a 5-county area: Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson counties. So it's important that an applicant operates in one or all of these 5 counties, at least one of these counties. And applicants should be tax exempt under 501c3 of the IRS code. And another thing that we are looking for is that you must show evidence of functioning as an intermediary organization, and through the work that you've been doing, also depict that you have the potential to re-grant foundation resources through a community-directed process that truly reflects the proximate priority community, the communities with the greatest needs. So their voices and what their priorities are is what we are very much interested in. And I know on this webinar, there are organizations that are current grant partners. Yes, you are eligible to apply, so take a look at it closely. Next slide, please. So with the investment in impact, in terms of the award amount, we're going to look at a variety of um, attributes to make the decision on the award amount. So definitely we're going to look at the scale of the proposed project, the organization's potential for impact through the community-directed giving process, and then the annual budget of the applicant. You will note that we don't have a minimum budget requirement for this call. So this award is one time and restricted grant. So one time we are not making promises that we are going to have this all repeated. The term is 2 years, and we have up to $4 million that our board has allowed us to invest in this open call. Reporting is going to be annual, and there would be opportunities for awardees to learn from each other and for us to learn with awardees and the grantees to help inform our work going forward. Next slide, Jocelyn. Okay. So this is the rubric. We will be using this for decision making to assess how each application aligns with the foundation's objective to support community-directed giving through initiatives and institutions to advance health equity. What I'm asking you to do is to really take a good look at this, because this is what we are going to use to help inform how we score the applications that come in. So it's your go-to guide. And I would also suggest that after you write your LOI and if you're invited in to submit a proposal, make sure that you have someone review what you've written, give them the rubric for them to see whether what you wrote is in alignment with the rubric. So we have 6 main categories in the rubric, and we have a total optimum score points of 40. So we are looking at it being equity focused. We are really interested in if what you're proposing to do impacts the individuals and families with the greatest need, with those underlying conditions facing health disparities in equitable systems, and also whose income falls below the survival threshold. We use something called ALICE, Asset Limited. Regan, help me out. Asset Limited, Income Constrained,
constrained and
Employed.
employed.
Okay, I passed that test. The second category that we have is around potential for impact. Andrew is going to dig into that more because that's what we are going to look at with our LOI. So in the application, you have to be able to demonstrate the plan to build the capacity in developing, monitoring, and administering applications, and also being able to manage the grants in partnership with private and public funders. So it seems like I'm reading because all this is also on our website. You have to demonstrate that what you're proposing is offered by the community. So not going into a room and then deciding XYZ. How do you make sure that you have the authentic voice, the authentic input of community members as you do this work? Team capacity is another thing that we look at. Do you or does your organization have the capacity, the skill sets, the experience to ensure that you have a continued success with this initiative? And then we have health equity innovation. And with that category, we are looking at if there are mechanisms in place at the organization that to understand the dynamic health equity needs and underlying system drivers and evolves approaches in response to what is at stake. And then finally, we really look at collaboration. And so being able to demonstrate that you are collaborating with other groups, you are showing productive and mission-driven strategic partnerships, coalition building, and collaboration. As a funder, we recognize that we can do this work alone, and it's important that we work differently. And so with the recognition that we bring in other groups that are proximate to the community, we came up with this open call, which was informed by a small group of local nonprofits that helped inform how this call was shaped. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, and a reminder that we have a Q&A session after, and so we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Andrew?
Thank you, Abena. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Levac, and like Abena, I'm a Senior Program Officer here at St. David's Foundation. And I'm going to move through kind of quickly just a few slides around some guidance around particularly filling out the letter of intent, which is the first of the two phases of this process. So in this open call, there's this sort of first threshold, which is, submitting a letter of intent, which is responding to one question. And then after that, we will score those based on a rubric. And if the score of the applicant reaches a threshold, that person will be invited to, that organization will be invited to submit a full application. So first I wanted just to start off with what and why of an LOI, what and why of a letter of intent. And I kind of have three things I wanted to share around that. The first is, you heard Reagan talk about our commitment to health equity. You heard her specifically talk about our commitment to serving the communities with the greatest health needs. And that recognition that those communities are often communities that we know the least about. So throughout this year, you've probably been quite aware that we've issued 4 open calls with very much the intent to recognize that while we valued our invitation only process historically, we really want to open up our processes whenever possible to any organizations, coalitions, groups in our community that would be eligible to apply. And that to a certain extent levels the playing field and gives access to us. And simply by inviting folks, we may not know the full universe of organizations that we would love to partner with. So that's a fundamental piece of the open call process and this first piece of that, which is the LOI. Particularly with the LOI, another thing is that we're really trying to, in the honor of health equity and of your very valued time, really conserve everyone's time and trying to see if there's a potential match here. This is a really low stakes opportunity for you to take a look at this particular call and say, could this be a fit for us? And us asking one very important specific question for you to respond to and having us assess that to see, do we want to learn more? Is this a valuable opportunity where we could potentially see ourselves supporting your organization? And if so, then we move forward to the next step of that. And the last point I would make is that also this process, regardless of if your application moves to the full application process, it's really a really important opportunity for us to learn about the important work that you're all doing and get a sense of that. So that's really important. And so we're learning a lot through opening up our process, learning about partnerships, coalitions that organizations are a part of, and just learning broadly, again, more about the community that we serve. So we really encourage anyone who thinks there might be a fit to go ahead and submit rather low stakes letter of intent. And I'll talk specifically about that in a moment. So next slide, Joycelyn. The LOI, as Abena mentioned, there's this rubric, and you saw 6 different categories for this rubric. But for the LOI itself, we're looking at one aspect of that rubric, one category, and that is the potential for impact. And this goes, and we're going to basically score your LOI based on one question and looking at, does it address this issue. Is it high potential for impact or low potential for impact, your proposal? So I want to go ahead and read the question that you'll be responding to. And you can find this on our website, on the call. There's the full information about the application. And then we've actually provided a second PDF document on our website that actually shares the application questions and the letter of intent questions that you'll be filling out. So you can do those on your own on a Word document before you go into our giving data system if you want. So you can talk about them. It's just a tool for you. But the question that anyone who submits an LOI will be responding to is this, and I will quote, describe how your organization is currently functioning as an intermediary. Detail your plans to build capacity in developing, monitoring, and administering applications and managing grants in partnership with private and/or public funders. And so your response to that question, we suggest the length of 300 to 500 words, but there is no word limit. And we will be looking at these criteria in your response to that question to score your LOI and advance those with the higher score. And so as you can see, a 10-point, which is what you're shooting for, would be if your organization demonstrates significant success as an intermediary, or it has a fully developed plan to build capacity as an intermediary in developing, monitoring, and administering applications and managing grants in partnership with private and/or public funders. A middle score would be demonstrating early signs of that, early signs of success, or a plan to build capacity. And an organization would score a 0 if there is not any early signs of success, no history, or no plans or knowledge of that experience, or experience in doing that work. So think about that. Ultimately, you want to be able to write to this rubric question, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to my tips and pointers around that. So Joycelyn, if you go to the next slide. Just a little bit again about the process and where we sit right now. So the call opened about 2 weeks ago. You are here on the 14th of August at the webinar. And basically next Monday, anyone who's registered for the webinar will receive this recorded message at this recording at that time. And there may be closed captioning, I believe, that Morgan said that will be provided at that time. For this call. Someone asked about closed captioning. And then finally, the LOI is due Friday, September 13th by 5 p.m. And that is a hard cutoff deadline. Just want to make people aware that the system shuts down at 5. So make sure that you've clicked submit before 5 p.m. Hopefully well before that time to eliminate stress in your life. And then so basically we'll have a period of 2 weeks that our team will be reviewing those LOIs. And you should hear by the 27th of September a notification of if you've either been invited to submit a full application or if the LOI has been declined and there wouldn't be any further progression. And I just want to make a note to people to know that we will inform you by the 27th around your notification. So if you don't hear from us, follow up to questions or follow up to any contact you have at the foundation. We will let you know what that determination is. It'll come as an automatically generated response, but if it gets stuck in your spam folder for any reason, check your spam folder. But if you haven't heard from us, follow up with us and we'll let you know our decision by that time, by the end of the day on the 27th. And then anyone who's invited for a full application has another month basically through October 25th to submit the full application. Again, you can see what those application questions are now. They match exactly to the rubric that Abhina shared with those 6 categories. So we want you to speak to each of those categories in the application. And then basically by the end of December, there will be notification for the applications that have been determined to be funded. And then funding will begin in January 2025. It's a 2-year funding period in which we're really focused on supporting intermediary organizations to build their capacity. There's the opportunity for them to do some re-granting if they so choose during that time, but it's an unrestricted grant to really help build their capacity as an intermediary partner. There will be some reporting throughout that time, and particularly some convening amongst the grantees, up to 3 opportunities for grantees to convene over that period of time to learn from each other as they build their capacity as intermediary partners. So with that, I'll ask Joyson to go to the next slide, which is a little bit of tips and suggestions, things we just want to emphasize for you as you develop your proposal and you write it. The first thing I want y'all to know is it's scored by a team. So, you're welcome, to, ask questions but, and you're welcome to ask staff, but, you may know that Abena and Andrew talked about this, but we may not necessarily be the person that scores your proposal. And the reason I mention that is don't assume that who's ever reviewing your proposal knows a lot about your organization. We talk about how we want you to say it, talk about what you do, show it, give examples so that we can score it. And so just know that, really be, don't assume that people know about your organization. Please tell your story. Because we're not, you're not sure who it is that's going to be reviewing your proposal. The rubric is the key to the scoring, right? That is the main decision point. So speak to that rubric. I would encourage you, if you're writing a proposal, have a peer review what you've written and let them score your proposal based on the rubric that is provided, right? Did you answer the question based on the criteria that we're looking for? We're really looking for. That is your guide to success in determining how you will receive a high score to move both your LOI forward and your application. Just a few other tips. Reagan mentioned our strategic plan, which likely most of you are familiar with. It's on our website. Look through our strategic plan to understand our thinking. It really is a source code to our commitment to community-directed giving, to sharing our power through intermediaries and having intermediaries help really drive communities to address and equip them to address their own health needs, particularly that area around goal 3 should be really illustrative to the nature of this call. And then the overall plan really speaks to the intent and the issues that we're interested in our intermediaries supporting. That is, that we really hope that through the intermediary process, the organizations can fund anything that fits within our broad mission and our broad strategic plan. Read the application questions carefully and fully, and really try to fully respond to them. If there's something that we've asked, we really want to hear about that. As I mentioned, use the rubric to inform your responses. And again, say it, show it so we can score it. I joke that my daughter's in algebra and she has to show her work. She can't just go to the back of the book and find the answer and write it in. And the same point, we really want to hear not only, have you been serving historically as an intermediary? Tell us about that. Tell us about that work. Tell us about your plans to build your capacity to do this. We want to hear you talk concretely with examples about that work. Bring that work to life so that you're not just repeating what the rubric says, but there's some context there and that we really fully understand what you mean by repeating those words that are in the rubric. And then a really helpful piece on our website, if you look at the funding applications, you'll see the call here for the intermediary funding. And within that, if you scroll down past the announcement, all the way down to the bottom, there's a frequently asked questions section. That is constantly updated. Some fields are already filled out for you now, so you can certainly refer to those. And as we get more questions, and as we get questions today from the group, we will continue to populate that to answer a lot of your questions. Look there first. If those questions aren't answered and you still have a question and you're not in this webinar right now to ask one, which we're about to answer some questions around, you can always contact questions@stdavidsfoundation.org to get a very quick response from our team around that. That's really the best place to ask a question. Certainly if you have a relationship, you can ask someone, you can ask me, I'm going to be like, that's a great question. Questions at St. David's Foundation. Here's the question. It's going to go to that place so we can document it. So it's really, feel free to copy me. I'm happy to see it, but that's really the place where we're going to go to sort of categorize and collect all of those questions. So those are a few process and submission tips. And next slide is the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm sure. I'm going to hand it over to Joycelyn, our wonderful master of ceremonies, to commence the questions.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much to our panelists. Getting to our questions and answers. Some of you are already populating those, and we appreciate it. You all are on mute in this webinar feature. The Q&A is how we're going to use questions and answers. And we have this chat here, but actually, if you have technical issues, you can use questions and answers. We have plenty of people on staff to monitor the Q&A, not just for Q&A duplicates, but also to make sure people's needs are being met and we're being responsive to our participants here today. Thank you to everyone who submitted registration or questions during registration. Those were really helpful for us to understand where many of us were starting at and what you were interested in learning more about. We reviewed all of them. I reviewed all of them, and we put them into categories. We took out any duplicates, and we took out ones that we knew we were going to address in the call presentation today. If for some reason you don't see your question here, it was probably because it was categorized and responded to during the presentation. If you feel that is incorrect, I apologize, and please resubmit your question again, either in the question and answer or the chat. The same, once we finish with these registration questions, I'm going to go into our Q&A box and start pulling questions there and having our panelists answer them. If you feel like your question isn't being answered or like, that, like I have a follow-up to that, or well, this is what I really meant, please interact with us in that way because we want to make sure we get those questions, those answers to your questions. So from questions from registration, we had a lot of great questions around call goals. And, what was their priority? How did this come up? How did this come up as a priority for St. David's Foundation? What are the goals of this call? And so we hopefully answered those as we began our presentation. Reagan spoke about our strategic plan. Abena and Andrew spoke about the call goals, defined some terms, narrowed in on the needs and requirements. So call goals were addressed. Timing and next steps were another question. And so Andrew went over a timeline slide here. We also have that app on our website. As well, when you download the call documents, it'll be listed in a narrative form in the call documents as well. There were questions on eligibility, which are really great. There were some standard questions, which we hope we answered, or we feel we answered through, again, those call documents. It's also listed on our website. What is required to be eligible even for this call? There are some great questions that came up for eligibility as well. And so I'll actually start with Abena for eligibility. What kind of organizational infrastructure will be required to receive this grant?
All right, so I hope I interpret this correctly. So in terms of organizational infrastructure or organization, we are looking at a 501c3 organization. And with infrastructure, we are looking at, again, back to the rubrics, whether you have the team capacity, you have the potential for impact. Those are some of the key things that we'll be looking at to see whether you pass the LOI stage for the application. And Andrew, feel free to weigh in if there's something that is helpful.
No, I would agree with that. It just sort of, the organizational infrastructure will be based on, your ability to have team capacity, to have potential for impact, to be of and by a community. That's the sort of infrastructure we're looking for. So if the infrastructure is there in order to fulfill the rubric, then you'll be in a good position.
Great. And Andrew, is there a minimum operating budget amount for the intermediate organization?
Well, that's a great question because we did have that requirement for our community-driven change open call, but we don't actually have that in this case. There's not a minimum operating budget for an intermediary organization. Again, and it kind of goes back to the same thing that we said. What we are looking for is, regardless of the size of the organization, have you been able to have a history as an intermediary organization? Are you able to build up a plan for serving as an intermediary? Do you have the team capacity existing to be able to carry out that work? Those are the things that we'll be looking at much more than operating budget.
Great. So then from registration, there were also a couple of program-specific questions, and so we'll go through these quickly. Abana, can funding be used to support a project between the grantee organization and a community partner organization, benefiting grantee organization clients?
So the intent of this open call is to build capacity for groups with the potential to rate grants. So it's not for direct services.
Andrew, what type of services will St. David's Foundation prioritize when awarding the Investing in Impact funding opportunity?
Great question. This is where we encourage applicants to look at our strategic plan, look at our mission, look at our strategic vision. We are really interested in organizations supporting anything in terms of when they re-grant, anything that would support our broad mission and our broad strategic plan. And we recognize that we're kind of working in partnership with community to build out that strategic plan and further define that. And so we see this as an opportunity, right? Having philanthropic partners to think that through with us, but we're quite, interested in that conversation and that being a partnership. But anything that's roughly in line is a good fit for us. And so that should, knowing the things that you're interested in re-granting, you should probably have a good sense of if they fit up with our broad strategic plan, those 3 external goals.
Right. Abana, we are a funder that is equipped to also re-grant funds from entities like St. David's. Are we eligible to apply?
The answer is yes. We have guidance on the call that current grantees are eligible to apply. If you are a funder already re-granting funds of St. David's Foundation funds, yes, you're eligible to apply.
Great.
Again, make sure that you look at the scoring rubric. And since this is going to support capacity, think through on how you can strengthen your capacity and infrastructure to do better.
Okay. And then Andrew, a question about partnerships. How do I find a larger entity to work with, my library or maybe their own smaller organization?
Yeah, I love this question because, as you look at this proposal, as I mentioned, part of the process of looking at sitting in on this webinar, reading the funding opportunity, is you may think, oh, actually, my library or my small organization may not be in a position to be an intermediary. But boy, I can imagine us, being a recipient of funding from another organization, a larger organization, an organization that has some history in re-granting. And so what I would say is, think about your networks. And if you don't think that you are the right person to apply, maybe there is an organization that you partner with before. Encourage them to apply. Maybe they would be well suited for this and are unfamiliar with this. So yeah, if you aren't the entity to apply, there may be a community partner who is. So we encourage that.
What I'll add to that is that there are interagency councils in all the counties. So make sure you are connected and you expand your network to find an organization that aligns with what you are interested in doing.
Sorry, I was muted then. I have gone through all our registration questions. Thank you so much again for taking the time to add those in as you registered. I'm going to switch over to our question and answer box now, as that's what I call it, because it's a box on my screen. All right, so next is, I think Amina, you have allocated $4 million for this grant, divided among all the grantees. I think our organization has acted as an intermediary before and as a good fit for this grant, but I'm concerned about asking for the right amount without being rejected. Any thoughts?
That sounds harsh. What I would say is that although we have $4 million and it seems like it's not a lot, we are going to use different criteria to make decisions. So I encourage you to ask for what you truly need to do what you propose to do. And if there are any decisions that require reductions, we'll definitely let you know. But it's best to ask for what you truly need to do what you're proposing to do.
I'll add a couple of things, Bob, and I agree with that completely. And I'll add a couple of additional things I might share. And One is that remember that primarily this application is focused on capacity building. We're really looking at in this next 2 years, working with intermediary partners to help build their capacity around serving as a strong, sustainable intermediary partner. And so while there is an opportunity for regranting within this funding, and it is unrestricted funding, so the organization gets to determine that, really the applications that that really rise to the top is ones that are really thinking about how they'll build their capacity and put themselves in a great position for a long-term sustainable role as an intermediary partner of ourselves and other organizations. And if you're interested on what that could look like, in the funding call on pages 2 to 3, we talk about some real concrete examples about what some of those capacity building opportunities are. And so some of those things, wouldn't take the majority of a $4 million allocation from the organization. So you can kind of think about right-sizing that piece as one aspect of it. Part of it has to do with the size and scale of your organization and who you're serving. And the final thing I'll say is there's not a question around budget in the LOI, so you have some time to think about that. So don't worry about that immediately. And then when we come to the application piece, there's an opportunity where you talk about what your plans are for the funding, and you'll ask for a certain amount. But we certainly wouldn't penalize an organization for that fear of being rejected. If the proposal is strong, we will think through about what our capacity is to fund it and what's possible.
Yeah, so ask for what you need. Really need, yeah.
As Abena originally said.
Great. So this next question also had a question about appropriate amount to ask for. So we talked about that. And then this organization was also on our Monday call, which was around housing and health. Are we able to apply for both grants that are open?
The answer is yes. You can apply for both grants if you meet the eligibility criteria.
Great. Thanks, Abena. Andrew, will there be guidance for intermediaries to distribute funding, or do we need to develop our own metrics?
Yeah, this is rather open. I mentioned the broad guidance is, for distributing funding, work that's in alignment with our strategic plan. But other than that, we don't intend to be the overseers of the processes that organizations take. We want them to create their own processes. And that's the idea of the capacity building opportunity, is to really think through what would the process look like for distributing funding? How could that particularly be community driven, community owned, to resonate and feel like there's transparency with the community around that? So those would be the metrics that we would be most interested in looking at, because this really is grounded in our commitment to equip communities to address their own health needs. So that's, I think, maybe the one guidance that we would give around that aspect.
Right.
And I'll say that there's this opportunity for the cohorts to come together. Sorry, Joycelyn.
No.
The cohorts, by having these intermediaries come together, we hope that there will be some shared learning around those processes that they hope to implement, and some learning from each other. Okay, I'm done.
But did you want to add anything?
No, I was going to say what Andrew just said.
Okay.
Okay.
Abena, can one intermediary serve more than one county?
As long as it's within the 5-county area, Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson, the answer is yes.
Great. Andrew, can you share more about, you just shared about the reporting and convening. What about any expectations for the funded organization?
Yeah, in terms of reporting, we're trying to really simplify our reporting, and we really just want to be able to gain an understanding of the learning and the processes and the evolution of your work over time. And that should be fairly simple. What's, I think, more compelling for us right now is this opportunity of having a cohort, a learning community that would meet up to 3 times over the course of 2 years, and perhaps additional engagement beyond that. But that we really want to see if there's an opportunity for these different intermediate organizations to learn from each other, to really identify what their needs are. I wouldn't say that we have a set plan for what those convenings will look like, because that should really be directed by the needs, the interests, the motivations of the grantees themselves. So we're kind of develop that organically as we come together and bring this group together.
Thank you. Abhinav, are there guidelines to the regranting process? Must a procurement process take place, or can we regrant to smaller organizations serving these communities, those that were identified by the community, who we are already in partnership, collaborating with, or have MOUs with?
So this is a whole lot of questions in one question. So I'm going to break it down.
Please.
So in response to other guidelines to the re-granting process, no, we haven't put any guidelines in place. But what you must know is that it has to align with our strategic plan and our goal to advance health equity. Must the procurement process take place? No. Can we re-grant to smaller organizations serving these communities and identified by the community who are already in partnership collaborating, have MOUs with? So the answer is yes, you can re-grant to smaller organizations, but please bear in mind that the call is community directed given through intermediaries. So how do you bring those voices of the community to the table to make decisions on how these funds will be re-granted out?
Great. Thank you. Andrew, is it required that organizations applying to be an intermediary conduct re-granting activities?
The short answer is no. The short answer is that this funding opportunity is really primarily focused on building the capacity of intermediary organizations. With that said, as organizations build their capacity, particularly in the second year, there's probably likely an opportunity that organizations may want to start testing out some of their processes and systems. So we certainly encourage that, but there's no one sort of pathway that we expect for organizations to do. Other organizations may be much further along and have been re-granting for a while and might want to do more re-granting, and we're open to that too. But there's certainly not a requirement to re-grant in this 2-year period. But over time, we would hope that through this process, they would be in a good position to do so after the end.
Great. Abhinav, or anyone here out of our panelists, this is a great question. What is St. David's wanting to learn from this opportunity and from their awardees?
So we are a learning foundation. We're excited about our new strategic plan. We know we don't have all the answers. And so we want to learn alongside our community partners. That is going to help inform our practices and how we form and deepen strategic partnerships. We are also hoping that through this open call, the awardees will build that peer network and continue to learn from and with each other. We recognize that as we are structured at the foundation, we don't have the same relationships that some of you do with the communities with the greatest need. And so what can we learn from you?
Thanks.
Nice. I'll add a couple things.
Yeah.
I want to learn and the foundation wants to learn, how can we decentralize our power and resources to have them be more rooted in the communities that we serve? How can our resources be more responsive to community needs by partnering with organizations who are closer to the ground? How can communities define those needs and help build out our definition of health equity and help build our strategic plan? And I guess the last thing I would say is, can we help build philanthropic infrastructure in Central Texas so that we aren't the only game in town and that we can share power with a lot of other partners, and that there are multiple ways that community members feel like they have a say in philanthropy in this region?
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew, does the granting or regranting have to be monetary? Could we grant in kind, capital gifts?
Yeah, I love this. I think there are, when we talk about the roles of intermediaries, it's not just regranting. There's, work around capacity building. There's all sorts of things, and they could be resources like in-kind capital gifts. Like think about, can you mobilize, human resources to support organizations? There's all sorts of ideas around that. And what we love is that, I'm like, tell me more, right? That's the fun about this, is that, we want to hear your ideas, your thoughts around that. We're open to that. Yeah, we don't have one set idea about what this looks like. If you get frustrated by the vagueness of this, consider that an invitation to be bold, to come up with a piece. There's a rubric in here around health equity innovation. Think about the innovation. What can you do to really, take a risk? This is an opportunity for you to take a risk and for us to take a risk.
Great, thank you. Avana, about how many grantees will there be?
I wish I knew the answer to that. Also, again, apply, send in your LOIs, and we'll see the number of competitive LOIs that come in that advance to the proposal stage. And we are looking to invest up to $4 million in this initiative. So in terms of how many grantees, I don't have an answer to that.
I'm going to do a time check as a facilitator. It's 4:55. We have about 5 more minutes. We do have 19 open questions. We are going to stay a little bit after 5 o'clock in order to answer these questions and get it on the recording as far as we can go. If you need to drop off at 5 o'clock or even now, I completely understand. We are appreciative of you being here and taking the time. If you have questions, programmatic questions, technical questions, please feel free to use the email addresses listed on our slide, questions@stdavidsfoundation.org, or for technical issues on our Giving Data platform, grants.info@stdavidsfoundation.org. We appreciate you, and we hope you stay connected. We're really excited about this call. And again, we want to continue having our question and answer session flow over 5 o'clock, but also want to honor the time commitment you have already made and what you may need to do at 5 o'clock. So let's go to our next question, which I think is to Andrew. If we are a current fiscal agent for community events, will you need to see the budget for that or just our organization's budget?
Yeah, no, we'll just want the organization's budget to be submitted in the full application. There's no budget in the LOI, but this is an unrestricted grant, so we're not looking for specific line items. There's a narrative around plans for funding, but we're not looking for that level of detail.
There may be certain circumstances that we may come back for additional information.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Avana, what type of organizations have been funded by SDF and us?
We've had a breadth of different organizations from large, mid-size, not a whole lot of smaller organizations. With our new strategic plan with these open calls, we are interested in building new relationships with organizations and other groups that we haven't engaged with in the past.
Thanks, Avana. Andrew, does St. David's have restrictions on what sorts of organizations you're able to grant funding to? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm reading through this all. Okay, so does St. David's have restrictions on what sorts of organizations we would be able to grant fund? An example, would we be able to grant funds to school districts, city governments, etc.?
Yeah, great question. I don't believe we have any particular restrictions, but I'm going to ask Reagan to answer that in a second. But what I will say is that this call is particularly focused on, we talk about building the capacity of organizations to fund and support smaller, lower resource entities that are closer and connected to community. So organizations with an interest in that will score higher. But I don't believe there's any restrictions on how and if an intermediary identified a group to fund. Reagan, do you want to weigh in on that?
That's correct. And I think Andrew's explanation adds adds direction to that, which is that largely has to do with the purpose of this call, which is to make sure that any entity it's going to is community directed. So if that is school district, city governments, we wouldn't anticipate your re-granting, for example, to a for-profit entity. But that so long as what you're re-granting to is working on health equity and is within the community, it would be allowable.
Thank you. Abena, would you share an example of a vibrant intermediary and a few examples of the kind of grant refunding projects they have taken on?
I wonder what vibrant means. So, so with intermediaries, we are really interested in organizations that are locally rooted, have the trusted relationships with the proximate communities that we are looking to serve. We have a few organizations functioning as intermediaries currently at the foundation, and what the grant to aligns with our mission to advance health equity. And so projects include sometimes increasing access to food for our neighbors facing food insecurity. Sometimes it's building the capacity of a local leader. So it varies. It has to align with advancing health equity. And I invite my colleagues to chime in.
Right. Andrew, is there a specific amount that St. David's Foundation wants intermediaries to re-grant?
No specific amount. And again, kind of re-emphasizing that the real fundamental primary interest of this opportunity is to build capacity of those organizations so that they'll be in a position in the future to do more re-granting. So kind of a unique opportunity to sort of make sure that organizations are in a unique position to re-grant down the road.
Abena, what type of activities are you wanting to see funded by the intermediary?
I love this question. Certainly not water and other environmental issues. We are looking at issues that align with our mission and what is in our strategic plan.
Right. Andrew, is there a possibility of a phone call with an organization representative?
Oh, with the representative of the foundation, I'm assuming. You know, what we would really encourage is that if you have a question, submit it to questions@stdavidsfoundation.org. If you continue not to be able to have your question answered, let questions at understand that, and we can figure out if there's a way to have a conversation to better answer it.
Thank you. Abena, are the future grantees expected to use this funding to continue or develop their services as an intermediary, or are these funds to be used specifically for redistributing? Asking, since this is a one-time unrestricted grant.
We are interested in the organization using the funds to build their capacity to do re-granting and do re-granting if you build your capacity. So in terms of developing services, I'm not sure what services mean. Is it direct services? But that's not the intent of this call.
Yeah, I think they mean like, or if I had to guess, it would be that the future grantee is expected to use this funding to continue being an intermediary.
It's like, how do you strengthen your infrastructure to be an effective intermediary organization?
Thank you. Andrew, we are in the process of getting our 501c3. Will we be considered? Also, our organization is CHW based, and that is the only history of our capacity and work we have done. Would that be considered?
Kind of let me divide these questions out. In terms of, you must be a 501c3 to be eligible for this opportunity. So if at the time of application, you're not registered as a 501c3, don't have a tax ID, you would not be eligible. You would be eligible later on. This, you know, we will continue to sort of invest in this issue of community directed giving, but at the time you would not be eligible. And then the other piece is sort of a question around, you have a certain history of work, certainly we're looking for a demonstrated history of serving as an intermediary or a clear plan to be moving in that direction. So you would certainly need a history of your plan to sort of move into this space and the efforts that you've done to build up your capacity to date around that. If you were just like had never thought of this work historically and now you're going to write a grant for it, you would not be in a great position for the application.
Right. Abhinav, would advocacy be an eligible activity for regranting?
That's a great question. It depends on what the individual means by advocacy. Is it to help educate individuals? I'm going to turn it over to Reagan.
Sure. So, as both Andrew and Abena have focused on, this particular opportunity is to build the capacity of organizations to regrant, and the regranting should be in line with what the organization is doing and be supportive of the strategic plan. So we aren't currently placing restrictions on what that regranting would be used for.
Great, thank you. Andrew, we have 8 nonprofit organizations that we currently support through our DBA, the Kitchen Divas Health Outreach. Are we limited to the number of organizations that we can redistribute grant funds to?
No, there wouldn't be any limitations on number of organizations that you could re-grant to. And again, re-emphasizing that, we'd also want to know about what you were doing around the capacity and beyond the re-grantee.
Abhinav, many low capacity community groups and organizations are very successful. Some want to build basic accounting and administrative capacity. Does the grantee need to re-grant, or could they support lower capacity organizations to build their own capacity to manage community-driven work and strengthen their administrative capacity?
So I do agree that many low capacity community groups and organizations are very successful. Yes, that really exists. And so in terms of, does the grantee need to re-grant, or could they support lower capacity organizations to build their own capacity to manage community-driven work and strengthen their own administrative capacity? If I'm interpreting it correctly, we are really interested in the community-directed giving aspect of it. And so what aspect of the re-granting is being informed by the community voice? And you can come off mute to see whether we answered your question. I just want to clarify.
Sue, do you want to tell us if you...
Hi, yeah, thank you. I was trying to find the unmute button.
No problem.
Yeah, I guess the re-granting could happen for the lower resourced organizations to build their own capacity. Some of them are really, really good at doing a lot of community activities, but they don't have really any administrative capacity. Some may not even have a bank account. So that's the kind of thing I was wondering about.
Andrew, Reagan?
Can pipe up. So I think that, we, as part of this call, recognize the importance of intermediaries that are often working with these smaller groups to do some of the exact activities that you're talking about. I think for this particular call, we're looking at those intermediaries that may have that capacity, but are also thinking about or already doing re-granting. And so I think that we understand both, but in this particular case, we were focused on those intermediary organizations that both have potential to support capacity building of smaller entities, but also have the potential for re-granting in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sue. Andrew, hello. Would it be appropriate to re-grant funds to victims of domestic violence, women and children, at one or more organizations as individuals if direct services are not the focus?
Yeah, we talk about, there's a potential there. I would encourage y'all to look at the funding opportunity and sort of what we're interested in. We certainly talk about the opportunity to fund informal community networks, community-based movements, and community constituents. So there could be potentially an opportunity to redistribute to individuals. Yeah, we will determine that.
Abhinav, can funds be used for capacity building for the organization to ensure it develops a comprehensive plan that is community-driven, equity, and outcomes focused before identifying the agencies it will support? Or do they need to be pre-identified during the application process?
You don't have to pre-identify the organizations that could potentially benefit from re-granting. The funds for this call is to help build your capacity as an organization to put into, to build the infrastructure to do the re-granting. And so yes to the first part of your question, to ensure it develops a comprehensive plan that is community-driven, equity, and outcomes focused. So yes to that.
Great. Andrew, we would be curious about speaking with and learning from other intermediaries in this community. Is there a way to attend cohort meetings or even create gatherings of other applicants, even if we do not receive funding?
Yeah, I would just encourage the organizations that, yeah, you can learn from other intermediaries, without us playing a role in convening, for the cohort itself, that, we will keep that to our, to the existing grantees, just as a matter of sort of logistics. But we do intend to share our learning. We have a research and insights page, and, as a learning organization, we're really committed to learning through this process and sharing that information with folks. And so I think there'll be ample opportunities to talk with us about what we're learning. And then, there's other existing intermediaries through various community foundations in Central Texas and other entities that I would encourage you to reach out to and learn.
Great. Abhinav, could you expand on your hopes for having a community-directed process and how funds are distributed to smaller organizations?
Great question. So we are having this open call because the foundation recognizes that we don't have relationships. We don't know the communities with the greatest needs. And so it was important for us to have this intermediary call to allow organizations that have that proximate relationship to reach a priority population that we are interested in. So this call is around community-directed giving. Again, the organization that receives the funding should not go and decide how the funding should be distributed with staff and board. How do you authentically bring community at the table to help in the decision-making in terms of how the funds are distributed? We know that communities with the greatest need have solutions to some of the needs that they're experiencing. They are often not asked. So how do you bring those voices in an equitable way to inform and lead some of the re-granting that you do?
Yeah. Andrew, can this grant be used for staffing?
Yes, this is an unrestricted grant, so organizations get to determine how they would want to use this funding, and if that staff would allow them to build their capacity, that makes sense. The one thing I would say about that is just recognize it's a limited 2-year grant opportunity. So there's just a little inherent dynamic of the fact that there's no guarantee that funding would occur after that 2-year period. So something to consider.
Great. Abhinav, our last question, is an organization that functions with a fiscal sponsor instead of our own 501c3 eligible for this funding opportunity?
So the eligibility criteria is for the applicant to be a 501c3 organization. So we cannot entertain fiscal sponsorships at this time. The 501c3 has to apply.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to just close us out one more time? We have gone through 35 questions. Thank you so much, community, for staying. and being part of our learning and conversation today. Andrew, you want to close us out?
Thanks to Joycelyn for being a wonderful master of ceremonies. Thanks to all of you for staying all the way 15 minutes after expected time. Really, really appreciate it. If we didn't answer your question, or if we answered it and you didn't feel like we answered it well, questions at stdavidsfoundation.org is where you go, and we'll be happy to engage with you there. If you have any technical questions on the application itself, through our Giving Data platform, grantsinfo@stdavidsfoundation.org can help you navigate that. Thank all of you for the work that you're doing in Central Texas. Thank you for your interest in partnership with us to advance health equity. Stay connected to our funding opportunities page. If this ended up not being an interesting funding opportunity for you, it didn't seem like quite the right fit, continue to look at our funding opportunities webpage. And if you think it might be, write an LOI, send it in. We'll read it with enthusiasm and commitment and honesty and trust. So thank you very, very much.